Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone, and I'm here with Greg and Sarah for HeroesX office hours for v12 of HeroesX. Many versions have gone by, and we're discussing the questions for hours 11 and 12 today. So I will start by reading the hour 11 question, which is, in your reading of the Odyssey, do you have a sense of completion by the time you reach the end? Or do you have a sense of incompleteness, as if the story had not been fully told? Either way you answer this question, please try to back up your answer by citing one detail that you think supports your line of thinking.
Well, it's not everybody has the same view, which is interesting, which is perhaps what you're expecting. I think that those who are getting a sense of completion are finding different points at which they feel that there is a completion. One example is returning to the bed of Penelope, for example. And another is that you have to not just return home physically to your location, but also to make things right. I think this was something in one of your videos that you commented, Greg. Yeah. So there are a number of things that have to happen for him to make that completeness by sorting things out. How important do you think that is?
Well, isn't it interesting that already in the ancient world, people didn't agree on where the Odyssey should end? My latest problem is the sheer brutality that happens during the slaughter of the suitors, then after the slaughter of the suitors, where you see the punishment of the collaborators, both men and women. And I come down to just one detail, that Odysseus feels that he has to fumigate the palace. He has to purify it of pollution, and there was pollution there. So to me, in a sense, the way the suitors get their comeuppance is very incomplete, and can be complete only if we rethink the whole Odyssey in terms of a festival of Apollo, where the Odyssey is retold and where there's an opportunity for, may I put it this way, fumigating the pollution by way of the performance of the Odyssey. So it's only in the context of a festival that all the dysfunctionalities of the heroic past can be processed, and those things can be processed not in any one festival. It has to be the recurrence of the festival, which has to keep on spinning. I'm trying to avoid linear images forever. Mm-hmm. And so in a sense, the only way we can find completion is within the reception of the Odyssey in the post-heroic age.
Yes. So that sort of compensation and almost a ritual fumigation by way of performance. Yes. in later
Thank
times.
You. And that's the key. Performance, which we have to understand from an anthropological point of view as a ritual in itself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So another a couple of points that people are making is that part of the sense of completion is not so much in terms of the Odyssey itself, but more of a sense of completion in terms of the Iliad, because there were a number of things that were incomplete in the Iliad, which are resolved within the Odyssey. We hear what happened next. We hear, culminating in hearing about the funeral of Achilles. So that last scene, it's almost not even involving Odysseus here. Well, I suppose he was there, but yes. There are these other threads that are drawn to a conclusion, but then some open-endedness in terms of the Odyssey itself.
I love that. I love the way you said that, Sarah. In my mind, I now have problems also with the ending of the Iliad, in the sense that lately I've become more and more worried about the funeral of Patroklos as arranged by Achilles, because I see a lot of very bad imperfections there, pollutions there. Could I start with Exhibit A? That is that the Myrmidons, who are the fighting men commanded by Achilles, after a day of slaughtering the enemy, they don't bother to wash up for the funeral feast at the funeral of Patroklos. Well, that's just not proper. It's not ritually proper, and there's something off about the whole funeral of Patroklos. And even the funeral games, I now think, are somehow incomplete because there's such an obsession with presenting these games as if they were the first athletic games ever. And so again, I come back to this problem of pollution in myth, purification in the ritual retelling of myth. And then where do we see a decent funeral? It's the funeral of Hector, who is the enemy, and where the entire community is visualized as becoming integrated in the process of a funeral. So you see my problem now. I'm thinking that both the Iliad and the Odyssey are very incomplete. Sure, the Odyssey ties up some loose ends. I quite agree with Sarah and with the respondents who are sensitive to that. But in the same breath, I would say, the very fact that the spirit of Agamemnon in Hades refers to Odysseus as Olbios is out of sync. You can't call somebody Olbios until they're dead, in the sense that somebody becomes truly Olbios. In other words, blessed as a cult hero is blessed only after death. Odysseus hasn't died yet. It's okay for the spirit of Agamemnon to call Achilles Olbios, because Achilles is dead. Okay, so there you see a sense of completion for the Iliad, and there I agree with people who are concentrating on that part of the narrative. But when it comes to the Odyssey, I just don't have a good sense of completeness at the beginning of Rhapsody 24. I guess I have a better sense once Odysseus finally connects with his father, because if you connect with your father, you're connecting with your ancestors, and in a sense, you have a kind of a realization of the present in terms of a forward-moving sequence of ancestors that finally result in the present.
And it's significant that that takes place in an orchard, isn't it? We've seen that imagery of seedlings and
I just love
trees
that.
growing in.
And what do you learn in an orchard? In the case of Odysseus, you learn where everything belongs in a paradise, one day at a time, because the father takes the son through the orchard on a regular basis, and it's imprinted in the mind and heart of the hero of the present. So that's how I think when the father and the son finally get reunited, you have a sense of how it should happen in the present, in the post-heroic age as well. A kind of a modeling of the post-heroic age.
Yes,
it's definitely how it didn't happen with Achilles and his father.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So in that way too, it's a wrapping up of the Iliad. Sorry, Sarah.
And we've seen some sort of hints of some of that idealized society with Alkinos and the orchards there as well.
Yes.
Hints of that. So another sense of maybe incompleteness that people are talking about is that we know he is going to have to then go off on this further journey with the oar-stroke winnowing shovel. And so yes, I think they get that. That's kind of an amazing thought. But then what happens back on Ithaca? Suddenly, he's been absent for 20 years. He's there very briefly, then he goes off again. And so what happens? Penelope's left on her own again. To what extent maybe has Telemachus come of age enough to take over? Is he going to take over? And these are questions that we're waiting for the Odyssey Part 2. What's going to happen next?
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, it's one of those things that after the generation of Odysseus, by the time you get to Telemachus, it's an afterthought. It's no longer the heroic age. Yes. And this has been formulated most beautifully by Richard P. Martin in an article where he argues that the generation of Telemachus, including people like Orestes, who's the model in some ways for Telemachus, that people in that generation are no longer heroic age. They're more like the transitional age that takes us from the world of heroes to the post-heroic world, where the elites of different communities trace themselves back to heroes. I always found it so interesting that in myths about the foundation of communities on the island of Lesbos, the dynastic powers that trace themselves back to the heroic age trace themselves only as far back as Orestes, or sometimes not even Orestes, but the son of Orestes, but not Agamemnon. Now, wait a minute. Isn't it obvious that if you're going to trace yourself back to the heroic age, why don't you go all the way back to Agamemnon instead of Orestes? But it's Orestes that belongs to the generation. It's Telemachus who belongs to the generation. It's Peisistratus, son of Nestor, who belongs to the generation that becomes the, shall we say, the set of founding quote unquote fathers for the present. And I think for our participants, Orestes isn't the best example. Even Telemachus isn't the best example because we don't know very much about Ithaca after Odysseus goes off into the sunset again. The place where we know a lot is Peisistratus, the son of Nestor. And this is a boy who never even went to Troy, unlike his older brother Antilochus, who had that beautiful heroic death that is so beautifully memorialized in Iliad 23. No, in the case of Peisistratus, he was a stay-at-home boy, and then he becomes the ancestor of the dynasty of Athens that oversees the crystallization of the Iliad as we know it, which is 6th century Athens. It's amazing.
Wow, yes. Yeah, so we really do see the beginnings of that transition.
Yeah.
But we keep focusing on Odysseus, who is, even at the end, is somewhat looking back. He's still fighting, and yeah, can't quite let that go, can he?
It's one of those things where I don't know. And I once had a professor at Indiana University when I was a sophomore or something who said the Greeks can't leave a good story alone. It's not the way I would put it, but I remember I was very struck with that. Is that if you have a good story, it just can't end.
Well, shall we go to our 12?
We must, because we'll never end with this with this one.
Exactly, the story will never end.
And I think that's very much how everyone's feeling about it. It's like you keep on needing to go back to it and find more, and all the twists and turns that have been shoving it. You know.
Well, here's another way to say it, dear Sarah. The way the expert in world religions, Mircea Eliade, said it: eternal return.
Let me ask another question.
Yes,
for
go for
discussion.
it. Go for it.
We can say that Homeric poetry, unlike Hesiodic poetry, does not address directly the following question: what is justice and what is injustice? But can we say that Homeric poetry does not address this question: what is right and what is wrong?
No. So the people are thinking carefully about what does right and wrong mean, and in different contexts. So one example that's being discussed here is maybe the difference between say a group interaction that maybe we see on the Shield of Achilles, or the way Odysseus interacts, and the model of a sort of an individual judgment of an autocratic ruler, maybe in Hesiod, for example. And so they're thinking in those sorts of terms. Is that one of the things that you're reading in it, Greg?
Oh, I think that our participants are starting to get very acclimatized to the way our group here is thinking, and we have as a group, and that includes not only you, dear Sarah, and you, dear Keith, but also dear Janet and Ilem, is that we as a group are, how shall I say it? We're so acclimatized already to this idea that the Iliad just doesn't talk about justice in a legal, in a juridical sense. And actually, that's what I was playing with when I formulated the problem. I won't even call it a question. The problem that I formulated is, I was kind of sneaky, wasn't I, to say right and wrong, because I was trying to explore situations where you don't have to have a word for it, just have to have an instinct about, just as I said it, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And you certainly get a good sense of that, I think, in the Iliad. It's just that it's not mapped out juridically, whereas the poetry attributed to Hesiod is a different form of poetry that that really does specialize in formulating things in a juridical way. And when I say juridical, that means in a way that fits the cosmos. So it's in a way the same cosmos to which the Iliad and the Odyssey belong. But it's just that the voice that's expressing what the cosmos is expressing it not so much as a story, or I should say as a narrative of deeds, but rather as a kind of schematic dividing of the pie that is humanity into its different slices, and each slice is a different size, because we're dealing with a world, like it or not, that's hierarchical. Some people get a bigger slice than others, but that's still considered right versus wrong.
Well, one of the examples that has been mentioned of things that are maybe proper or either acceptable or improper, or not acceptable and improper, is that example of Agamemnon and wanting a bigger piece of the pie than he really has been accorded by common consent. Yes,
that's a perfect example. I was just rereading the work of a brilliant young humorist, David F. Elmer, who says that whenever Homeric poetry tries to grasp what the people are, it's sort of an incomplete grasp, in the sense that you think of people primarily as members of a military expedition. Well, that's not society of and by itself, is it? But somehow the storytelling, the narrative of the Iliad packs everything into that kind of context. And you can appreciate how that evolves into people in general, only in terms of the reception of the Iliad and the Odyssey in the present tense of Homeric poetry being performed. Homeric poetry being performed is present tense, but what it tells about is the past tense of the heroic world.
Mm-hmm. And within the context of that heroic world, one of the things they're considering is that it's almost in a lot of cases it's the gods' opinion of, that they intervene.
Yes.
Particularly when there's an outrage, for example, when
Yes.
the priest of Apollo prays, or when Hector's body is being mistreated.
Great example.
They come and intervene.
Mm-hmm.
So, to what extent is the heroic world operating within? Because it's not like God saying, "Oh, this is right and this is wrong," or anything like that. But it's, as you said, there's a sort of a sense of it without it being formulated in a way. Is that?
I think what really helps me here is that amazing scene in Iliad 19 where Agamemnon says, "Okay, so I made a mistake." But the gods make mistakes too. Well, they did back then. But I think one thing that's pretty clear is that ate, A-T-E, long mark over the E, this personification of things going wrong. And she used to hang out with the Olympians until the Heracles story germinated. At that point, Zeus throws Ate out of Olympus, which means, hello, in the present, the gods are perfect. They were not perfect back when in the heroic age. And so even the gods mess up in the Iliad and even in the Odyssey. They become the perfect model for what we hope will be our perfection, which will never happen except that we recycle every year in our festivals and other such events. But for us, perfection is only something that will happen with a view to infinity, a circular infinity. Whereas the gods, they're okay. They're now okay.
And so there's also that aspect of judgment in the sense of, as you were saying, Ate made me do it. That it's their own personal judgment of a situation rather than judgment in a more absolute sense. And that applies to the heroes and the gods. And as someone's pointed out, they're played out in different ways, in different situations and with different people. So there seem to be quite a few examples of it.
Yes.
But then the gods are also can be quite vengeful, and that doesn't always seem to be, that seems to be a little bit random sometimes as well. Poseidon's ongoing anger at Odysseus.
Yes, and I want to face it. It's so there, but I also, in the same breath, want to say that this is something that heroes had to work out. But luckily for us, they are perfect. And so when we pray to the gods and they don't answer our prayers, I guess we're wrong. So that's it. But there is a sense of a perfectly working cosmos where if there's any mess up, it's because we mess up. We can't really blame the gods anymore the way Agamemnon could. Can I put it?
Yeah. Well, it sort of goes back to what you were saying earlier about Odysseus having to clear the pollution of slaughtering the suitors, but then also the suitors themselves were polluting proper rituals. They were just regarding animals as things to eat rather than really thinking about the rituals of the feast and so on and so forth. So there's a way that can be a sort of putting things right within the narrative, but sort of not. And I love the way you've been talking about how that's put right by the ritual of performance in the present. I think that's a lovely way of thinking about it.
It's almost as if you could visualize the heroic world on a stage, and at the end of the Odyssey, it's Odysseus himself who takes a mop and kind of mops the floor. But that's the signal.
And it gets the servants to do it. But I love the fact that in that scene as well, while all that's going on, and to disguise the fact that they're heading out so he can connect with Laertes, he gets the singer to sing. Okay, they'll think there's a wedding going on, but the singers come up at such critical times in the narrative, don't they?
Yes. And already that's a preview for how in the post-heroic world, singers can do it right, and they will perform the Odyssey in such a way that it is a ritual processing of the heroic world with its larger-than-life goodness and larger-than-life badness.
Well, two of you, thank you very much.
This has been so much fun, and it's kind of sad that we're now going to leave the Odyssey. But in a sense, we never leave the Odyssey. We never leave the Iliad, right?
Yeah.
Good.
All right, we'll see you next time for more.
Thank
of all
you,
of these
thank you,
things.
dear Sarah. Thank you, dear Keith.
Thanks, Greg.